Namaskar. Very, very welcome, Genji. Um,
Thank you so
welcome.
much,
Yeah,
Monica.
yeah. It's a pleasure that we are having you in the series.
My pleasure also.
Yeah. Kenji, I have heard that you were having a violin at your home. So was that your inspiration, that particular violin, the start of your musical journey? What was the story behind that violin?
Well, the story was that the violin had belonged to my grandfather's family,
Mm-hmm.
and they were in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, their house burned down, and as the house was burning down, someone threw the violin out the window to save it,
Oh.
and so it was saved, but it was already partially burned, and you can see the burn marks on the violin. So my parents had it, and it was no longer playable, but they hung it up on the wall, and I used to look at it and think, I wonder what that is, my parents loved music, and they played a lot of recordings of music in the house,
Mm-hmm.
but none of them played an instrument. Actually, this belonged in somewhere in my grandfather's family, but my father, if someone asked him whether he played music, he said, "Yes, I play the tape recorder," which was his way of saying he was an ardent music appreciator, but not a player.
Okay. So you always wanted to be the musician, you always wanted to come in the music line, or you had some other dream, some other plan?
What I remember from my early childhood is that I loved to sing,
Mm-hmm.
and I had recordings that I would sing along with, and I was very interested in music, but uh, it was just one of the other things,
Mm-hmm.
one of the many things I was doing. Actually, if I were to give you my first childhood wish, it was that I wanted to become a professional baseball player. So
Wow.
that didn't really turn out. But I was not in that way. I was not brought up in a musical household where my parents even thought to suggest that I might take up music
Mm-hmm.
seriously. When I got older and they could see how much I loved music, then they arranged for some lessons. But it was never suggested throughout my upbringing that I might be a musician. Actually, devoting myself to music. So that came from me as I got more and more into it, and then I realized at the age of 21 or so that I'm going to college, but actually what I really want to do is play music, and that's the thing that makes me the happiest. So that's what I want to do, and it made my mother very concerned because she was hoping I would get a proper profession.
Yeah, music is never like a proper profession. Still, early days, like in your college days, you were a guitarist.
Well, from primary school, I think I started when I was like 8 years old
Mhm.
to play guitar,
Mhm.
and I instantly we had tried I had tried out piano, but that didn't work out for me. And then they thought, what about guitar? And I really liked that instrument, and I started on a folk music guitar, and then I went to electric guitar,
Mhm.
and then later on, and I played rock and roll and these kinds of styles, the styles I was growing up with. And then later on, as my musical vision matured, then I went back to the acoustic guitar,
Okay.
and I started composing a,
Mhm.
a lot of music on that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So, what happened? How you came across the Indian music? What happened to you? What was the inspiration behind that you started learning Indian classical music? It was
Yes,
easy
that,
for you to learn Western music. It
yeah,
was,
I was going to college
yeah,
actually.
yeah.
I had started a new chapter. I moved away from my home,
Mm-hmm.
went to this small college in the Midwest, in
Mm-hmm.
Iowa, and I was playing a lot of guitar. And then I saw a poster hung up on the campus saying that there would
Mm-hmm.
be this musician, something something Khan, performing at the college. I had absolutely no idea who it was, but I was curious,
Mm-hmm.
and also I checked my calendar, and there were no good movies playing that day. So I thought, okay, so maybe I'll go to the concert. Little did I realize what I was about to embark on, but it was none other than Ustad Ali Akbar Khan
Mm-hmm.
who had been invited by the music department to perform at this tiny liberal arts college in Iowa with
Mm-hmm.
about 1,200 students, and he performed in the church on the campus, which was where they had many performances, and he came with Pandit Shankar Ghosh,
Mm-hmm.
and they also had a someone playing the tanpura, and so it was a completely new experience for me. I had never heard Indian music, whether it was recorded music or live music, nothing. This was it. And so as he began to play, uh, um, the first thing that I noticed about the music was, I mean, he was playing alone. He was playing the alap, what I later found out was the alap. And sometimes he would play something, and then both the tabla player and the tanpura player at the same time, they would start shaking their heads like this. And I thought, it's how rude of them if he made a mistake and they're both shaking their heads in disapproval. Um, I don't think it's that's a very nice ensemble to have. So of course it was only later that I found out that this in India means this in the West. So they were just immediately enthralled with his playing. But for us in the audience, we thought, oh, what's going on here? It's not going so well so far.
Okay. What you felt at that time, which pulled you towards Indian music to learn the Indian music from Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahab?
Well, by the middle of the concert, let's say at some point in the alap or in the jor, it was very peaceful and I fell asleep. And then when I woke up, he was in the middle of the fast jor, and I could not believe I had never seen a human being play an instrument with so much strength and vigor before. I said, "This is amazing. What this is an incredible experience." Even though I didn't understand it, but somehow I understand something. And so after the concert, he announced to the students, who were mostly students in the audience, saying that he had recently opened a college of music, of Indian music in California, and anyone was welcome to come and study at this college. And I thought, oh, that's a pretty far-fetched idea, and yeah, California, that's where they do all these crazy things, anyway. But another musical friend of mine on the campus, he also liked the concert very much, and he said, Ken, why don't we go out to California during the spring break? We'll drive out. It was about 50 hours of driving, and so we went out to California. We looked for the college. We eventually found it because they had changed their location in the meantime, and walked into a class. The class was filled with all kinds of instruments, Western instruments, Indian instruments, and the maestro Ali Akbar Khan was sitting on the dais, um, wearing not Indian clothes, but a flannel shirt, normal Western clothes. Um, but he was they were playing this music, and he was composing a line, and they were playing it over and over again, and it was had an incredible energy, and I just thought, this is something I want to try, and
Hmm.
so we both decided there and then that we would come back during the summer break, which was more like 6, 8 weeks, and study at the college, and that's how I began my studies.
Okay, great. So, how was your starting days, the earlier days with Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahab? Some memories, some incidences, if you want to share.
Well, I started when I was that summer. I had my 20th birthday, summer of 1972. I was very eager to
Hmm.
learn, and I just had picked up a sitar. No one suggested what I should play. I just picked it up, started playing,
Hmm.
and it was quite a memorable summer. And the first thing I noticed was because I wanted to get as far uh, up to the front as possible
Hmm.
to have a good view of him and to get as much as I could. And so what I noticed about 10 minutes after starting our what would be a 2-hour class,
Hmm.
and I was trying to take the position with my feet crossed over, my legs crossed over,
Hmm.
and within 10 minutes my legs had fallen completely asleep, and then they started hurting,
Hmm.
and I thought, oh, what am I going to do? I can't move because I'm right in front of the maestro.
Hmm.
But how will I survive for these 2 hours? And I remember it was very painful. And by the time the class was over, I couldn't even stand up. I almost fell over. So this was like the music itself. What he was teaching, it went in very easily for me. I mean, it was a beginner class, but I had been used to learning music by ear.
Hmm.
I never, even as playing Western music, I never liked to read a musical notation.
Hmm.
I always figured things out by listening. And so this is how we learn Indian music, of course. And
Yeah.
and so I, that the music was not a problem. The legs were a big problem.
Okay. Okay. So, how many years you learned sitar, and then you switched to sarod?
It was about well, I took the sitar home after that summer session, and I played on it for about a year. But when I came back to study at the college a year later to have one more session, I uh, I was starting to think about changing to sarod because I became much more attracted to the sound of the sarod. And I was in some indecision about it because I thought, oh, but Ken, you already played the sitar for a year, then you have to go all the way back to the beginning.
Hmm.
Of course, no one told me that after one year I was still at the beginning. And so, but I was trying to figure this out, and then one night I had a dream, and in the dream, Kansab came to me in the dream,
Hmm.
and he said, "What are you waiting for? Just start playing the sarod." And the next morning, I grabbed a student, grabbed a Sarod, and said, "All right, show me how this goes." And then I changed to Sarod.
Wow. In India, Guru Shishya tradition is the main tradition in teaching when it comes to teaching Indian classical music, especially. So we still follow the Gurukul Paddhati, Guru Shishya tradition. You have learned under the Guru Shishya tradition. So, as a guru, if you want to share when you were learning with Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahab.
Yeah, uh, Kansab taught us in this tradition, even though it was a big classroom. There were many of us in the classroom, but he said, "Look, the way we do it in India is I sing or I play, and you have to pick it up with your ear. You can write it down later if you want, but this is the only way to learn Indian music is by listening, and so there was a bit of chaos in the room because there were maybe 25 or 30 sitar and sarod players trying to get what he was giving. So it was not like a Gurukulu where maybe there were two or three students around the master, at least at that stage. Later on in my training, I would go to his house for private sittings, but a lot of the first training happened in the classroom. So it was so you not only had to tune into what Kansab was singing or playing, but you kind of had to tune out all the noise that was around. There were a lot of sitars and sarods next to us playing the wrong notes, and we just had to keep focused on getting the right note. And but the essence of the tradition of Guru Shishya Parampara was developed there. And there were just some adaptations for this big classroom experience that we had, because someone would always be notating, and after the class you could copy the notes down, and then practice that material at home. But and I think he knew instinctively that in the beginning, at least, he had to open the classroom up to anyone who wanted to learn. There were no auditions. Everyone could come and study, and he realized that the only way for him to end up with a few dedicated disciples would be to open it up to everybody, and then over the years he would find out who stuck around, who was still there. And
Yeah.
for the first 5 years, he didn't know my name.
Oh.
I was just one of the crowd. He was watching me. He was definitely watching me, and a few times he made comments in the class like, "You're good, but you have to get better." But he still didn't know my name. But then somewhere 5 years or so, I greeted him one day. He said, "Hi, Ken, right?" And I said, "Yes." Then I knew that we were getting that he was taking more notice of me, and it was a first step to what happened after 8 years, that I actually became a disciple in that, with the ceremony and everything like that.
Okay. So you have learned for almost 37 years, maybe more, if I'm not wrong, from Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahab. And how many years?
Well, 37 years, up to the time that he passed
Yeah.
away,
Yeah.
and since then, I still learn with him every day. I'm learning. I'm always working with his recordings, playing with him. I feel like he's in my room. He's in my head. There's the learning never ends, and we have so much recorded material, and so thousands of vocal compositions that he taught us, instrumental compositions, recordings that we can work with. So I feel very much that I'm still learning from him.
Wow. You are still living with your guru. So how this feeling is? What do you feel, and what you can say to our youths about this connection, this
Well,
relation of Guru Shishya, this relationship, and how to
yeah,
build this?
it's something very special. I think I was so lucky to literally my first contact with Indian music was with him. Who could ask for a better teacher and a better guru? So and he was teaching in America. So I was so fortunate. I think there were lots of Indians in India who were thinking, oh, they would love to study with him also, but it wasn't possible. Maybe they could catch him when he was in India, but this wasn't on a very regular or schedule where he would be teaching in India. So I had an incredible gift there to be able to work with him, and so I tried to give everything that I learned from him to my students also, and I think that's the only way one can get a really deep appreciation, and then over years a very complete education, and then to be able to present this music in its fullest state. And this is a problem in the modern world, because how many people have that 37 years now? It's not it's rare. So I think there's ways that we can work with technology to optimize time with students, and I teach some students in India through this medium, through Zoom, etc. As well as the students in my classes who are here in Switzerland and in the neighboring countries. But there's no shortcuts.
Hmm. Yeah, no shortcuts. Amazing. So when we speak about the technology, so we see different types of mics, the condenser mics, pickups are coming in the market, and musicians still everyone I think using the mics and all because this is the need of the time, the mics. Uh, and there are so many changes in the instrument like sitar, veena, sarod, every instrument has changed. So we use the technology. How do you feel? What do you think about this uses of microphones, the technology, whatever it is, the sound systems? What do you feel about it?
Well, it's I think basically uh, microphones have been used for many years now in
Yeah.
India and in the West, and they are improving. But
Yeah.
but also it's still not satisfactory. If you
Mhm.
listen to the sound of your instrument and how it resonates in a room without any amplification, and all the microtones and resonance that's there, you cannot capture all of that in a amplified
Mhm.
situation. You're gonna emphasize certain frequencies, so the
Mhm.
picture of the sound will never be
Mhm.
complete. Plus, it's partly a problem with the technology, and it's partly a problem with the musicians themselves that they feel that it should be as loud as possible. And the louder you make it, the more you're going to exaggerate certain sounds of the instrument and lose some of the finest vibrations of the instrument. And most of them haven't found their way around that yet. And so, but it's somewhat of a, I think, an insecurity thing that it just has to be loud. And I don't believe it has to be loud. And we have concerts here in the room where I'm sitting now, intimate Baitak style concerts, where we don't use any amplification. And it was always my wish for audiences to be able to experience the sound of the instruments as they really sound. So naturally, it can't be a big room. There's a limitation to how far the frequencies of an instrument can travel without a microphone. But in this room, small enough, we can seat maybe 50 people, and everyone, all the music lovers here in Basel, are so happy to listen to music. In this room, they actually don't want to go to the hall anymore and listen to the music because they say it doesn't compare. The sound is so much more beautiful in an acoustic environment. And of course, in the West, Western audiences are used to hearing all of their classical music unamplified. That's the way it is. Even a solo guitar in a big hall is not amplified, and so they have a natural instinct to want to hear just the real sound. Now, the sound of our instruments is more complex in some ways because we have all this resonant vibration that isn't plucked, let's say on a sitar, sarod, veena, and so that resonance is very fragile, and
Yeah.
it's difficult to project in a big hall. But it's always been my aim to bring out the best resonance that I can in my instrument, and to use a sound system in a way that preserves that resonance for the listeners and doesn't exaggerate just the loudness
Mm.
of the strokes.
So,
But it has to be a partnership between the soloist and the tabla player. You know,
yeah.
both have to be in agreement there. Otherwise, one is going to just decide that they're going to play much louder than the other, and and it doesn't
Right.
work.
Yeah. Right. You spoke about the loud music. So now in India, it is like general mentality. Your tendency is like if it is louder, and it is faster, so it is the best music. So everything which we can see in music, it should be very very loud and very very fast. Okay, so when we play sitar, the tan should be very very fast tan. Jhala should be like hawa, like air, it's flying in air. We are somewhere losing the concepts of deep alap kari. When we are taking that
Yeah.
so much of time, 1 hour to give the alap, then we slowly increase the rhythm, the lay, and we do the jod, and then increase the thok jhala, and then gat, and then it slowly goes to higher. So in India, everything we have to be very loud, very fast. How do you see this thing? How do you see it?
Well, I think it's in some ways it's just a reflection of the society. Everything is moving faster. The cars are going faster. The airplanes are going faster, um, and the time is going faster. We're running out of time. It seems like, and music also reflects that. And I think also at some point there's a perception from the musicians that the audience wants to hear uh, louder and faster
Hmm.
playing. That's what makes the audience
Yep.
happy, and it's true to some extent that an audience that is not really initiated and doesn't understand the beauty of a lap,
Hmm.
they will respond
Hmm.
to fast and loud playing. But but if the musicians just go with that response
Hmm.
and then forget about the alap, or they can't wait to go into fast jor and show everything fast, then the musician loses something, and the audience loses a lot also. I believe very strongly that the alap is where the soul of the raga resides, and unless you can get the soul of the raga in the alap, then you'll never be able to carry that soul, that feeling of the raga, into the faster sections.
Yeah.
I think great music can be played at any speed, but the speed alone does not guarantee great music.
Yeah.
And so we've learned, and my teacher taught us also that, uh, and that's why sometimes they wait to teach a lot, because it is just so difficult that a beginner will never be able to enter those depths. And it's true, in the beginning, a young player, physically, that's a good time to build up the strength of the body. But I think they need to be reminded and trained that without the alap, they'll never get the soul of the raga.
Right.
And so if you want to play soulful music, then you need to spend a lot of time with the alap. And musicians are forgetting that in many cases today. And you can't just play fast and retain the soul of the raga. So that's what I've always gone for, and of course Ali Akbar Khan Sahib's alaps were just so heart wrenching and soulful. That touched me about the music. I didn't grow up in a music tradition where I was very impressed with speed anyway. That was never a really important issue for me, and I was very impressed with his alaps, and I've spent many hours working and many years working on the laps, and the microtones and the shrutis that belong to those special ornaments in the alap. Those things you can't express at the highest speeds. When you
Yeah.
get to the highest speeds, all those microtones are gone.
Yeah.
They,
Yeah.
they can't be maintained. So that's what I go for, and I don't. I think every musician has to, if they're sincere about becoming a better musician. I'm not going to talk about a great musician, but a better musician. I think everyone should aspire to become better.
Hmm.
Then they have to look very honestly at what they're good at, but even more what they're not good at. What's missing? What could be better?
Right.
Yeah. And so, uh, if someone can face that about their music and realize, hopefully from a guru, that without the alap, there's no soul to the raga. Period. Full stop. So at some point, you have to face that.
Right. So very rightly said that expressions are only possible in alap, and alap is the soul of the rag, where we can express the rag, we can understand the rag, we can explore the rag in alap only. Very rightly. You have made some modifications in sarod, some changes. Want to
Yes.
know about them?
Yes, uh, I got a beautiful sarod from the master instrument maker Heyman, who also made Ali Akbar Khan Saab's instruments. But I felt it could be improved,
Mhm.
and so over the years I worked very hard to uh, balance the resonance of the instrument
Hmm.
in different ways, and so one of the biggest changes I made was the tumba. You know, the
Hmm.
what in most road players they play with a brass,
Hmm.
a small brass tumba. Brass is not really a musically resonating metal.
Hmm. Hmm.
It glitters. It's very shiny, but it really doesn't do much for the vibration of the instrument. And so I started experimenting with resonant materials like wood. Wood is
Hmm.
has that's they've been making musical instruments from wood for years, and so I've experimented with a mixture of woods.
Hmm.
I've increased the size of the tumba,
Hmm.
and I've also incorporated a bronze um, bell, a kind of a funnel. And bronze is a very musical instrument. You know, those bronze bowls that they play. They have an incredible resonance. And I have put one inside of the tumba. And so, with the use of several different kinds of wood, each having strong resonances in certain frequency ranges, plus the bronze to capture some of the very high frequencies, I've been able to increase the volume
Hmm.
and the depth and the brightness of the sarod at the same time. And
Hmm.
so, now I can sustain the meand
Hmm.
on the sarod,
Hmm.
the length of
Hmm.
the sound
Hmm.
for a lot longer, and that's a big. We struggle with that on sarod because once you pluck the note, then the tone is on its way to dying. It's just a question of when. And so the longer you can keep that tone alive, just like a singer, the longer,
Yep.
the more
Breathing.
support and diaphragm and breath control they have, the more they can keep one phrase alive. And that's helped me a lot on the sarod.
Would like to see that sarod, and if you can play a little bit of mint on that. So want to see that sustain because I have the veena. So would like to
Yeah.
see that.
Uh, I'll move this road around a little bit so you can see the different things first.
Yeah.
Um, the first what I spoke about is this tumba. You can see it here
Yeah.
in the back here.
Yeah.
You can see it's multicolored,
Yeah.
so it's actually three kinds of wood. The
Oh.
the 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 the, the, br- the bright colored wood here,
Huh.
that's what we call yellow cedar, which is a cedar is a very common wood for making guitars.
Uh-huh.
And then and it has a beautiful mid-range frequency. Then this wood in the middle is pear. It's a very hard wood, very resonant.
Oh.
And then on the bottom
Okay.
there's another piece
Uh-huh.
called spruce. And spruce is a very popular wood for making the tops of guitars.
Oh,
very resonant and warm sounding wood. So that's three different kinds of woods. You see, it's quite big,
yeah,
actually.
it's good.
And if you look inside, you can see there's like a little a horn coming down. Do
Yeah,
you see it?
yeah, yes, I can see that.
You see it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a hollow piece of bronze,
Oh,
which also rings with the high frequencies. So I experimented with this for several years. Made probably at least a dozen of these resonators with a craftsman because I can't do with wood, but I had the idea, and he was able to do what I asked, and so this was the last so far
yeah.
of these resonators. You'll see here that there's a hole
Hmm.
in the side here.
Yeah.
Now, most resonators, like the tuba of a sarod,
Hmm.
the hole is in the back.
Yeah.
You don't see
Yes.
it, but it's
Yes.
in the back.
It's in the back.
And I did this because uh, I wanted to make the resonator very big, to make more like a bigger speaker, has more sound.
Mhm.
But when I made it that big, I realized it was actually going to get in the way of my hand.
Mm.
It was going to block my hand. And then I thought, oh, well, I can just put the hole in the side to make room for my hand. Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
And I was told it wouldn't work, but long and short story, it worked, and it works fine.
Wow.
So that's the story of that. Now the other one of the other innovations I've done is that you'll notice on the pegs there are
Hmm.
these golden bands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now these are actually geared tuners.
Oh.
It means that I'm no longer, when I turn the peg,
Hmm.
I'm not turning the whole peg. I'm turning the gold
Oh.
gear, which makes the tuning much more precise.
Oh. Okay.
So it makes it much easier to tune these strings. I have it. You see, I have it for the four playing strings down here, and the other saw string up here, and also the chikari strings here, which
Yeah.
need a lot of tuning. We know that the sarod, because of its skin face,
Yeah.
it temperature changing, it
Hmm.
takes constant adjustment. So this makes it easier
Hmm.
to keep in tune.
Wow. Super.
One of the other things I've done is that the skin here, which is a goat skin, and that's traditional, but this is not an Indian goat skin. This is a Swiss goat. Swiss baby goat, uh, I started looking for them because I couldn't get a good Indian skin at one point, and here I was in Switzerland, what to do? So I found out that they do make goat skins frequently to make parchment, the old-fashioned paper, and also for the bigger animals, they make them for making drum heads.
Hmm.
So, but the best ones are the baby goats for the sarod because they're very thin. They're very thin when they're young, and these skins have a very different sound than Indian skins. I suspect it's because Swiss farmers they feed their goats actually. They get, in India, the goats are kind of have to make do with what they get, and so the Swiss goats have quite a luxurious diet compared. The skin has a much more elasticity, and which I think it makes better for vibration. Yeah. So this is another thing. What else did I do? Um, it's probably difficult to see here, but there's the position of the bridge here is very crucial on a sarod. Exactly how far it comes in, how the angle is, but mostly this distance is crucial to the sound of the instrument, and sometimes that changes depending on the temperature and humidity and the age of the skin.
Hmm.
And so to make micro adjustments of this bridge, it was always a big hassle because you see, we have these threads here that fasten the bridge to the end plate here.
Hmm.
But what we did is we put a hole through this last
Hmm.
nub,
Hmm.
and with a screw form here. So I can just turn a screw. Before we had to push the whole bridge back, take it off, take
Hmm.
the string off, and then wind the string to where you thought it should be, and then put it back on. Each time it was messing up the whole balance of the instrument. Now you can just, with a screwdriver back here, you can just turn it the exact amount you need to
Hmm.
tighten it or to loosen it, and
Hmm.
it becomes a very easy operation. So you can really make small adjustments. Uh, so these are just a few of the things that I've been able um,
Hmm.
uh,
Hmm.
uh, to change on the Sarod. I
Yeah.
played for many years in a very traditional um, position, and then my back had some problems. So I've been able to manage that with a few pillows to actually
Hmm.
lift my leg up, and also to lift the sarod up, and so it's easier on my back.
Hmm.
I should have done this 40 years ago, but you, they don't tell you in advance what's going to happen.
Right.
Well, people did warn me. They saw me sitting with the sarod in this crossed over leg, and they said, "That's just an awful position for your back, and your back is going to go out at some point." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. This is how the sarod is played.
Hmm.
You just have to do it."
Hmm.
And then my back went out, and then necessity was the mother of invention, and then I came up with this, and it's much easier on the back. The back is sometimes gets very worn out from maintaining this position. These things, there's no reason why we can't find ways that are better, actually better for the body to play the instruments. Also, in the Western music world, the guitar players, for years, the classical guitar players, they would have their leg lifted off the floor to get under the instrument.
Hmm.
And finally, they found out that was messing up their back. It was torquing their back, and now they've come up with another solution. So the resonance of the instrument is crucial.
Right.
In particular, the bass string is very resonant. So when this resonance increases, then you have so much more musical possibilities. You have just a lot of sound to work with. and as that sound is decaying, you can make music in that time, and
Right. Right.
it widens the whole range of your possibilities.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's deep down here, but it's has a lot of crystal clarity up on the high string. So it's become a very well balanced
Yeah.
instrument, and I just I love to play it.
Yeah.
You know,
And
I worked for years to increase this sound, and once I got the sound increased, then I realized now I have to be able to make good music with all that extra sound that I have. And it took me a while to be able to figure out how to use this, how to extend the phrases musically, not just have more sound to work with. So it's been a musical education also.
because actually one can perform gaiki anga in this kind of resonance and the sustain. Instrument can actually sing.
Yes. And this is what Kansapa always told us. He said, when you're playing, you're actually singing through the instrument. And that's why he taught us singing,
Yeah.
to get that phraseology in our consciousness,
Yeah.
so we would want to be able to express it through the instrument.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you don't sing, you don't know what those possibilities are
Right. Right. So you learn the singing also.
from day one.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Uh, Kenji, in Veena Venu Art Foundation, we are having several students who always get excited to meet the maestros and the experts. They want to know them. They want to speak to them. So one of our student, Rucha, is there, and she wanted to ask you one question. So if you are okay, I can let her in for 1 minute, and she can ask you something.
Sure, of course.
Yeah. So Rucha is here now. Rucha,
Hello, Rocha.
Hello,
Nice to meet
Panditji.
you.
Namaste. Hello, ma'am.
hi.
Yeah, I'm
Namaste.
really feeling very privileged to be a part of this series right now.
Yes, wonderful to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Panditji, I have a few questions for you. Like, I've read a bit about you, and I've come to know that you have learned Western music since your childhood. And I think in your 20s you started learning Hindustani classical music. So, how difficult was it for you to get into Hindustani classical music?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, musically it was not so difficult. I mean, in spite of the fact that I had never learned a note of Indian music up to the age of 20, I grew up singing. So I was always I always loved to sing, and I would pick up melodies off the radio, the record player, and when I was playing guitar as a youngster, I also learned melodies by listening, and this was already preparing me for how we learn Indian music, which is there are I know I teach at a conservatory now, and I know many students spend their whole lives, musical lives, reading music, and so when you ask them to just I don't let them bring in any paper into my classroom, and they just have to learn by ear, and it's quite an adjustment for them to realize that music doesn't actually need a piece of paper to be transmitted. It can go directly from Guru Mukhi Vidya, yeah, from the Guru's mouth, yeah, to the disciple. So all we need is to be able to listen and to internalize that. So in that way, it wasn't a problem. It was a big problem for me to sit on the floor with my legs crossed. That was a much bigger problem. And then of course there was I had missed 20 years of listening to music, to Indian music. I had to make that up, and it took time. But my teacher, the great Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahib, he he was so prolific in what he gave us. He was teaching us 4 days a week, 4 hours a day, 2 hours vocal, 2 hours instrumental, and so he was just flooding us with repertoire, all the ragas, all the forms, Khyal, Drupad, Tumri, Taranas, all the ways of developing the raga from Alap, Jorjala to the gut Bistar, Bol Bistar, all of these techniques. So he really gave us in that way a speed course to repertoire. Also, we learned probably 150 ragas.
Oh,
And within those ragas, thousands of compositions. So he was just because he was prolific also, and he learned from his father. He was literally a prisoner of his father for his first 18 years of his life, and he was practicing up to 18 hours a day. So he was stuffed with music completely. I mean, and so it was no problem for him to just turn it on and deliver it. And he had an advantage with us because at least a few of the students would always be writing the music down, and so he could see that even if we didn't get it all in one sitting, some of those students were writing it down and they could pass it on to us in the review sessions. So he could just go as fast as he wanted.
okay. Okay, thank you. One more question I have.
Yes.
Nowadays, I'm seeing that most of the youngsters, there is a growing craze for Western instruments, Western music, mainly the guitar. And also, I've seen that the inclination towards Hindustani classical music has started reducing. So I wanted to know, how do you feel about Hindustani classical music? What is
You
your
mean
experience?
you mean about the future of Hindustani classical music, or
No. Like you have been in you have been playing sarod for a very long time, and you have been a part of Hindustani classical music for quite a long time. So when you hear Hindustani classical music, or when you play, how do you feel? What do you feel? What is your experience when you're hearing or when you're playing?
yeah, I feel wonderful. I feel this is I found the music that I was looking for. I think for young people, every young person goes through a phase where they need to explore. They're curious about the world, and musically, it's natural for young Indians who hear a lot of popular music from the West to get curious about these things. I was growing up in the West. I played a little piano, I played guitar, I played cello, I played folk music, rock and roll, jazz, classical. I was experimenting quite a bit, and then I had the curiosity to take that step to Indian music, and then I realized this is where I want to live, in this tradition. So it was good for me, but these young people, if they're going to get a sincere wish to play Indian classical music, then maybe they'll make a full circle. They'll do some experimenting with popular music styles, guitar, or whatever. And if it's in them to want to learn Indian classical music, they'll find their way back to it. I'm confident. But the thing is, Indian classical music, not everyone is let's say, has that inkling, has that desire to play it. And you have to have a great desire to play it, and a great desire for all the sacrifices, because it's more than playing popular guitar. I know that. It's a lifetime pursuit. And so before you make that decision, you need to come to it and come to it then with a full heart. You know, it's different if you grow up in a musical family, a classical music family. It's almost natural. You know, that you'll get it because you've grown up with it, and it's wonderful how the tradition can be transmitted from parents to children, and that's one way. But with the mass of people in India now, and the relatively large community of lovers of Indian classical music, it's still, you know, for someone to want to take that up as a lifelong pursuit, with all the other things going on in the world, um, you know, they better have a strong wish. So if they don't, then it's better they do something else.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome, pleasure. Are you playing music also?
Yeah, I am currently learning sitar from Radhika ma'am. So,
Great, great. Well, I wish
so
you all
I
the best.
really, thank you. No, I really enjoy it, like especially when I'm hearing to music. So I wanted to know how you feel when you are hearing to Indian uh, classical music.
Yeah. Well, as I say, since I was 20 years old, and I'm 68 years old now, this has been this central part of my life, and I feel just as excited about it now uh, as ever, even more. So I'm so I feel so lucky that I just found this possibility.
Okay. Thank you, and really, I really love talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. All the best to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Kenji, uh, Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahab made so many beautiful ragas, so many beautiful, like Chandranandan. I heard many other ragas of him, Medhavi also. So I request you to play one of his raga, uh, whichever you want to.
Well, it's a very complex raga, actually.
It's very, very beautiful. It was amazing, wonderful, superb, very beautiful. So it was such a beautiful ragarak, Chandranandan, and I heard other rags also of him. So you must be having, like you said, there are thousands of compositions of Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahib that you have learned from him. So there must be, they have must written somewhere in maybe the form of book, or you must be preserving them in audio form or videos of. Do you have such kind of archives or such kind of you have preserved them? And
Yes, I have materials here. Everything that I've learned from him. There are notations of the compositions I learned from him in class. There are some recordings of the classes. Actually, the biggest archive of his material, his legacy that he taught at the Al Akbar College in California, is housed there, and they have thousands and thousands of materials in their archive library. Notations, audio tapes, video tapes of the lessons for almost 40 years. So it's an incomparable treasure house of materials. So for future generations, there's some hope that some dedicated students can go through that material.
this recordings is only for the students of college, or you have already published it, or you are planning to publish it?
I think at some point, some pieces have been made available. There's a few classes I think that have been published. I'm not sure if they stayed up on the internet, but right now it's not a library that you can just log into and listen to. It's not available like that at this point. I don't know what the future will bring. I think somehow all that material should be available to all sincere students.
I heard that you were teaching from your childhood. When you were a kid, and that time you were teaching your friends, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I think since I was 10 years old, I was teaching.
Oh.
The next door neighbor, how to play guitar.
So you have a great experience of teaching. So when it comes to understanding the student, the psychology of a student, we need to nowadays we need to understand student. It's not like early days, like old days, when guru is saying something and a student has to follow that. Now we have to understand the student. We have to make him understand very politely. We have to think from his point of view. So as a teacher, your journey and how you understand your student, their psychology, their mentality, how do you teach them?
Well, I'm I'm always observing the students,
Mm-hmm.
and whether I'm teaching in the class
Mm-hmm.
and I see them how they're functioning in the group,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm teaching them one to one. Of course, then it's really focused, so
Mm-hmm.
much focused on them, and I can really dig in to like what's going to help them take the next step. And so I've over the years I've learned about pedagogy. I mean, in the Western sense, to some extent, but in another sense, it's just in the same way that uh, that we learn Indian music to sharpen our powers of observation and listening. I realize I have to also observe the student and listen to the student, and every student needs something a little bit different. Because as we talked about before, every student has strengths and weaknesses. There's no exception to that, and so uh, uh, and so our job as teachers are to recognize the strengths, but the weakness is to carefully and step by step help them move through the weaknesses. Because sometimes it's a mental block, sometimes it's a listening block, sometimes the hand needs an in between exercise to to get to the next step, and so it's there's all kinds of little tools that I've discovered. So you might say it's somehow it's a mixture of Indian and Western pedagogy.
Uh, what is Shanti means to you?
Shanti is, as I understand it, means peace.
So I think it's always with you 24 into 7, if I'm not wrong. I'm trying to say,
Yes,
I want to know
I have
about your Shanti.
I have two Shantis right next to me. You see, I have a singing Shanti and an instrumental Shanti. The story of this is, uh, I have to tell you, I never had that interest or facility or skills to make things, to put things together with my hands. They're good for music, but to operate machinery, not really. And so when I when I became so frustrated
Hmm.
that the real tanpura
Hmm.
in it, mostly in India,
Hmm.
had been replaced by the electronic tanpura, when I first started doing concerts in India, um, they would ask me what pitch I was playing, and they would come with an instrument and someone to play it,
Hmm.
uh, who could, and sometimes that person was really a professional tanpura player, and they could even tune it. But there was always a tanpura, and whether it had to, manage with a vocal tanpura or whatever, there was a tanpura. And then slowly but surely, people started showing up with an electronic, um, box. And this was also before the time of smartphones. But these electronic, what were they called? The Ragmala or Ragini, also these brands. And I felt that the sound was horrible. I was outraged that how could you replace the exquisite sound of a real tampura with this electronic buzzing. And so I decided that there must be a better way, because it was and also Indian artists would come to Europe, and then they'd bring their electronic tampuras and turn them on the stage, and they were loud, and the audience would say, Ken, can you please ask them to turn that off? It's just awful. It doesn't match with the sound of Indian music at all. So it was coming from all sides, and then I thought there must be a way to make a device to play a tampura. I mean, we can put somebody on the moon, why can't we make a little device? And I started imagining something above the tempura, you know, going in like a circular motion, and I started saying, okay, now what if we would just attach finger-like plectrums to a disc and have it controlled by a motor up here, and then of course it couldn't be level because then it would be hitting the strings on both ways when it turned. So we'd have to you know, angle it so it would just hit the strings in the proper way, and then as they would go on the other side, they wouldn't touch the strings. And so little by little, I conceived this thing and was able to find a very fine instrument maker who was interested in the project. And so we did it, and it's wonderful. I have a big one that's a vocal tempura, so that when we have vocal class, we can sing with the tempura.
Singing Shanti.
And huh?
The singing Shanti.
The singing shanti. Yeah. And before that, I had always used the harmonium
Oh.
to use in the vocal class, just to save my voice from constantly having to give everything. But I didn't like the harmonium. I never liked to play a keyboard. I had an awful experience as a child with a piano. And besides which, I always found the harmoniums were out of tune. I think, here we are, we're taught all about microtones in Indian music, how to bring them out with our singing, with our instruments, and you have a harmonium that's sitting there playing out of tune. and I didn't like it at all. And so when we got the shanti, the vocal shanti, we started using it, and immediately I noticed a difference in my teaching. The students noticed a difference, and one of the students said, Ken, I feel like when you were using the harmonium, you were teaching us the note. Now with this Shanti Tempura, you're teaching us the music. And I thought, that's very observant, because I felt so immersed in the real sound of the tempura. I wanted to sing that much better, because I wasn't fighting against these out of tune notes on the harmonium. So it's been wonderful.
And it's wonderful.
Tempura.
Yeah, I can see the tempura.
But if we take off the covering,
Wow. It's
you
awesome.
see it?
Yes. It's amazing. The drums are going. And it's actual wooden tanpura. Normal.
It's a wooden tempura. Yeah, it's a Ricky Ram. It's a flat back tempura. It's a 6-string tempura, and then you have the motor up here, and then this is the disc, and these are the plectrums.
Yeah. And it works with like electronic current or what?
Yes, it's electronic. This is the transformer, and I can make it go faster or slower. Yeah, like that.
Beautiful.
And all of the legs here, can you see the legs that are holding it up?
Yeah.
They're actually they screw in, so I can adjust the height of this to make the plectrums play louder or softer also.
Wow.
And you can see here it also has these geared pegs,
Yeah.
these golden pegs, to make the tuning much easier.
Right.
Here you can see part of this big tempura. It's quite a big tempura, but it's also a wooden tempura, because we wanted to make sure that it would be easy to put the disc
Mm-hmm.
on top of it. With a big gorded tempura, it was more complicated.
Hmm.
So here we've got
Wow.
and
Thank you so much, Kenji. It was very nice to meet you, very nice to know so many things from you. It's a wonderful experience. Thank you so much. Thank you for
thank you,
coming.
Radhika. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you all the best in your project. It's a wonderful project to share this music with so many people.
Thank you.
All the
Namaskar.
best.
Namaskar.
Yeah. Okay. Namaskar. Bye-bye.